cancer treatment is changing.
Fine-tuned to the individual.
It's not just about the cancer, it is about the person.
From complementary therapies
That's more effective than the painkillers.
to complex surgeries.
Science is finding new ways to live longer and better with cancer.
A little bit of the hope has come back.
Cancer, a story of hope. Tuesday 8:30, ABC and streaming on iView.
5 years ago, I was convicted of a dreadful crime that I did not commit.
I pray that the real killer can at last be found and punished.
If you'd be willing to help us in any way.
Find out why that girl lied, please.
If she didn't kill him, you divorced her for no reason.
Everything they stole from me, I want it all back.
Innocent, tomorrow on ABC TV and on iView.
Today, a virus blind spot forces tough new restrictions in Greater Sydney.
I can't remember a time when our state has been challenged to such an extent. I can't remember a time when government has had to make these difficult decisions.
New South Wales records over 100 new local cases and another death. Also ahead, Victoria grapples with a growing number of infections and exposure sites on day 2 of its snap lockdown. And South Australia bars almost all Victorian residents from entering the state. Hello and welcome to ABC News. I'm Miriam Corowa. The New South Wales Government has announced tougher COVID restrictions across Greater Sydney. There were 111 new locally acquired cases and the state has recorded another death. Reporter Kaban Gok has more.
111 cases, that's the second highest number that we've seen since this outbreak began. And sadly, as you said, a man in his 80s from southwest Sydney has passed away from COVID-19. The concerning thing for the state government is the number of people infectious in the community. There were 29 people throughout their entire time infectious in the community and another 10 that were in the community for part of the time while infectious. Now, they're the numbers that are stubborn, that aren't going down, and they're the numbers that we need to see plummet if we want to get out of this lockdown. What we have also seen is that 80% of today's cases come from southwest Sydney. This is the main cluster which is causing problems for the state government. And of the 111, 60 of them were from Fairfield alone. So that's the main concern. We also learnt today that there are 75 cases in hospital right now, including 18 people in ICU, and of that, 6 of them are on ventilators. If you are living in the 3 local government areas of concern in southwest Sydney, that's Canterbury, Bankstown, Liverpool and Fairfield, from midnight tonight, you are now banned from leaving your local government area for work or leisure. The only people who are allowed to leave at the moment are health or emergency workers, so that also includes disability and aged care workers. But if you are leaving the area, you have to undergo surveillance testing, be tested every 3 days, and are not allowed to leave for work if you're showing any symptoms. So that's the big announcement today, where you're not allowed to leave this area, and it's to try and quash the virus. As the Premier Gladys Berejiklian admitted today that we are not seeing that curve go down, and that is the main concern. Outside of these 3 local government areas, though, across Greater Sydney, only critical retail will be allowed to operate. So that includes things like supermarkets and chemists. A list of what is critical and what is not will be provided later today from the state government. And also the big announcement is construction work, large or small, will be put on hold until July 30. So only essential or urgent repairs can undergo during this next fortnight. You're not allowed to work in construction otherwise during the next 2 weeks. And if your boss is trying to pressure or force you to go into work when you're not supposed to, they can now be issued a $10,000 spot fine for doing so. Here's what the Premier had to say a little earlier ago.
We don't know where the virus is lurking. We know where their exposure sites are, but we have a blind spot on the last few days, and we need to make sure that we cover that off. Now, the next decision was a difficult one, a very difficult one. But until July 30, until midnight on July 30, there will be a pause on all construction, large or small.
Well, one of the issues is the data that we're seeing has a 5 to 7 day lag. So the issue is if you were infectious and you may not have known it, you could have infected it to your family and they may have gone about their day in the community further spreading this virus. But the Chief Health Officer also stated that we're seeing a seeding in workplaces now, which could very well have spanned from someone in your family. And the issue is a lot of cases also seem to be asymptomatic. So you may not know it, but you have the virus. So the Chief Health Officer wants everyone to go about their days as if they could come into contact with the virus at any place, anywhere. Here's what the Chief Health Officer had to say. Take a listen.
I'd just like to reinforce that you don't have to have symptoms to be able to pass on COVID. And in contrast, you're actually very infectious before you have symptoms. And so just because you and your mother are well, don't go and visit your mother unless she needs that care and compassion. If you do need to go there, make sure that you take all the precautions possible and you choose, notwithstanding this very windy day today, outdoor environments, the well-ventilated environments, try and maintain the social distancing. This all needs to be balanced against care and compassion and mental health, and I think that's some of the challenges we deal with in getting those settings right.
This is all, of course, breaking news, and the state government will have more details and clarify about those critical retail later on today. And that also includes regarding the Fairfield and southwest Sydney area where the childcare workers will be able to work or if they're forced to stay home as well.
Victoria has recorded 19 new cases of coronavirus, 18 of which have been infectious in the community. More than 160 exposure sites are listed in the state and over 10,000 close contacts have been identified. The Health Minister, Martin Foley, has outlined which locations the latest cases are linked to.
Firstly, we have an additional case at the MCG in level 2 of the MCC Members Reserve. 2 of his friends have the virus and they have recently travelled to Phillip Island. That's 3. A social contact of the Trinity grammar teacher at the MCG now has the virus, and we've learned about 2 further staff members at Trinity Grammar also testing positive. So that's 6. There's been a visit to Miss Frankie's restaurant in Cremone from a positive case that has seen 3 cases of transmission with a staff member and a patron sitting on nearby tables. So that's 9. There's also been another student at St Patrick's Primary School in Murrumbina, and that brings us to 10. We also have 2 staff members from Bacchus Marsh Grammar and 1 student. That brings us to 13. And we have 4 household contacts of the Young and Jackson's case, being the gentleman's wife and his 3 daughters, and the partner of one of the daughters. That brings us to 18. And 1 household contact of the original gentleman from the city of Hume who visited Coles. This was the case who had been isolating throughout their infectious period and had no either exposure sites or other contacts.
South Australia has barred almost all Victorian residents from entering the state and plans to prevent South Australians returning next week without specific exemptions, effective immediately. Only SA residents, people genuinely relocating or those fleeing domestic violence can enter from Victoria. There is still a 70-kilometre cross-border bubble zone, but Victorians cannot go any further into South Australia. And South Australian residents are being warned to come home now and do 2 weeks of home quarantine or risk being locked out early next week.
We'll be continually monitoring the situation in Victoria, and it is likely that early next week we will make further changes which will even prevent returning South Australians from coming in without applying for a specific exemption from SA Health. I think this gives you some indication as to the level of concern we have for the situation interstate and the steps we're taking to prevent the possibility of spread of COVID-19 and the Delta variant into South Australia, and also to enable us to minimise the need for further restrictions on the South Australian community.
WA has closed its borders to Victoria overnight following the worsening COVID situation in the east. Travellers from Victoria and Queensland are now only allowed to enter into the state with exemptions, and for New South Wales, travellers must show extenuating circumstances. The ACT is still considered a low-risk jurisdiction, with arrivals required to quarantine for 14 days. Soldiers in the top end are training to become a crucial part of border protection. North Force soldiers will monitor 1.8 million square kilometres of the Northern Territory and the Kimberley region of Western Australia.
In the mangroves of Leaders Creek, 73 kilometres northeast of Darwin, soldiers are in disguise training to become a surveillance tool for the country.
So we're patrolling the riverine systems, and we're looking out for anything that could be causing risk to our country. So sometimes there could be illegal fishermen or illegal activities occurring.
North Force is the Australian Defence Force's eyes and ears across the Northern Territory and parts of the Kimberley region in Western Australia. There are 450 soldiers all operating and assessing any potential threats to the country.
The threats will vary depending on the terrain and depending on the location, from the movement of illicit substances and people across our borders and trying to gain access to the Australian mainland.
Craig Norman is from the remote community of Borroloola and has been a part of North Force for 16 years.
My father was in North Force before. He served about 30 plus years, and so he joined in when he was 18 and I joined in when I was 18. And so
for him, the best part is being able to share his knowledge about the country to his comrades.
It's more about survival skills too, out on different sort of bushland, because a bit different from where I come from and up here and then the top end, so different sort of bush tackers and all that, but
whilst the soldiers were in their final stages of training, they had a special visitor keeping an eye on things.
We're ready for whatever threats, from humanitarian and disaster relief operations in our region, which we are often called upon to do, through to other security and stability operations.
Mika Wright is the only woman on the course and says learning off her local comrades has been extra special.
So Indigenous brothers and sisters who know the country far better than what I ever would. And I think that's beautiful, and we unite together to be able to protect our country.
All united to serve and protect the land and sea from any potential threats. Peter Lacey, ABC News.
More than 200 people have been killed in South Africa's worst unrest in years, with the toll almost doubling overnight. It's in response to the jailing of former President Jacob Zuma, who failed to appear at a corruption inquiry last week. Police have been protecting deliveries of food to supermarkets after days of widespread looting led to shortages. President Cyril Ramaphosa has vowed to restore order to the country and punish those who planned the violence.
We are after those people. We are going after them. We have identified a good number of them, and we will not allow anarchy and mayhem to just unfold in our country. It is most unfortunate that so much damage has been done to the country and people have lost their lives. That is the most concerning issue.
Hundreds. We're going now live to Townsville in Queensland, where Bridget McKenzie, the Minister for Emergency Delivery, is speaking.
Avail themselves of Commonwealth Government assistance, up to $600 for individuals if you've lost more than 20 hours a week work as a result of the lockdown, or up to $375 a week if you've lost between 8 and 20 hours work. And it's important, we've got so many sole traders and small businesses out there that will now be affected following the New South Wales Premier's recent announcements. Please do not self-assess. Log on to mygov.gov.au, check your eligibility and apply for this support. If you are a sole trader or small business and your turnover is between $75,000 $75,000 and $50 million, you are eligible for support up to $10,000 if you are located in a Commonwealth declared hotspot. We want to stand with communities and businesses through the tough times, and that's why we've been making this support available, as we will throughout this pandemic until we get to the other side.
Labor's argued that it's no surprise states and territories didn't agree to a single model of financial support for future lockdowns. Yesterday, National Cabinet proposed
The Commonwealth has been inconsistent so far in its delivery of financial support. What's your response to that?
Well, I can tell Australians, no matter which state and territory you live in, if you are subjected to a lockdown that goes beyond 7 days, you are able to receive an individual payment, as I said, of up to $600, depending on how much work you've lost as a result of the lockdown. And that is consistently going to be paid through Services Australia as the delivery model. So to claim that there's a lack of consistency in payment, absolutely not true.
The fact that the Prime Minister was forced to increase disaster payments from the Melbourne level to what's now happening in Sydney and being provided in Sydney, doesn't that prove Labor's point?
Well, I think when we look at how we've dealt with, as a state and federal governments, with the global pandemic, as issues have arisen, we've adjusted our response. That is absolutely the right and proper way to go about this. I'm confident that our government will stand with those that are doing it tough as a result of lockdown closures in any state and territory, not just today, not just tomorrow, but till the end of the global pandemic.
Do you think the New South Wales government might have been too slow to impose a hard lockdown, and is that one of the reasons why we're seeing the number of cases we are at the moment?
Well, as we've seen throughout this pandemic, different state and territory governments have reacted differently to cases within their communities. That's a matter for premiers and chief ministers, and the decisions that they make need to be based on science. I think what we're concerned about at a federal government level is making sure that individuals and businesses have the support they need to get through the pandemic, to get through the lockdown. It's incredibly tough as we see those people, particularly, in my home state of Victoria, being locked down again. And so the toll on your mental health and well-being is significant, and we want to make sure all Australians know, yes, you're in lockdown, those of you that are, but we're going to stand with you with the financial support and help you need. I think it's worth mentioning, though, today sees 9.9 million jabs in arms right across the country, and if we want to look to opening up our international borders and getting back to normal in this country, we need to increase that vaccination rate. I've had my first AstraZeneca, looking forward to the second, and the more Australians that we can get up and going with a vaccine, I think the better we're going to be.
Minister, shouldn't there be a bit more consistency and perhaps guidance from the Commonwealth as to when these states do choose to go into a lockdown?
Well, that's why we've chosen to make these funding arrangements based on Commonwealth declared hotspots. I live in a border town in Wodonga in Victoria, where I've been calling for over 18 months for a nationally consistent definition of what a hotspot is. So when are we going to lock a community down and shut businesses, and when aren't we? What are going to be those criteria and parameters? Now, unfortunately, we haven't been able to have an agreed definition between all the states and premiers and the Commonwealth. So we've gone it alone and said, as a Commonwealth, we have a set of criteria where we declare you a hotspot, and that's what we're going to base our funding response and support for those communities on. It's not just if you live in that Commonwealth declared hotspot area, it's also if you work in one. So we're looking to spread the, in conjunction with obviously the New South Wales and in coming days the Victorian government, that support as far and wide as we can.
Carbon emissions, would Barnaby Joyce lose his leadership of the Nationals if he agreed to net zero carbon emissions by 2050?
Well, I'm Senate Leader of the National Party. I know David Littleproud as the Deputy Leader and Barnaby Joyce as the Leader of the National Party have been very, very clear on the net zero emissions question. We want to see the plan that the government has around how we decrease emissions in this country and who pays. As yet, we haven't seen that. We're buoyed, obviously, by the Prime Minister's focus on technology, not taxes. But at the end of the day, we're sent to Canberra to represent rural and regional Australians, and we want to make sure that it's not our agriculture, mining and manufacturing industries that end up paying the ultimate price to lower emissions in this country.
That is the Emergency Management Minister, Bridget McKenzie there. Returning overseas, in the US, Los Angeles County in California has reintroduced a mandate requiring masks indoors as a surge of cases claws back at freedoms gained for vaccinated citizens. Despite a large reduction in cases from previous outbreaks, vaccinated Americans are seeing these restrictions as a collective punishment for those yet to receive the jab. US correspondent Greg Jennett has more.
This is LA County, very large area around Los Angeles City, as the name implies. And look, to put this in perspective, COVID-19 rates there are still massively lower, some 90% lower than what they were back in January at the peaks. But they are reaching averages of 1,000 new cases a day. And that has prompted local authorities to say, OK, the vaccinated are going to have to pay a price here for the unvaccinated because the unvaccinated account for nearly all of these new cases, apart from a very small number of what they call breakout or breakthrough cases of vaccinated people. So they've said that indoors, in public spaces, masks will have to be worn again. Doesn't matter whether you're vaccinated or not, you should be wearing masks in those indoor settings. Now, nationally, this isn't taking off just yet, but the CDC, through Rochelle Walensky, their director, has said this may be something that other jurisdictions, local authorities, counties and states might have to consider if you have these two conditions. One, low vaccination rates, and two, seemingly increasing coronavirus infection rates with the Delta variant at large as it is in the United States. So hasn't taken off yet, but there may well be an examination of this in some areas. The overarching message, as always in the United States with an abundance of supply of vaccines, though, is get out and get vaccinated. Only through that can we bring down this surge among the unvaccinated. And just to emphasise that point, of all the COVID-19 cases in US hospitals presently, the unvaccinated account for about 95% of those. And that's why Rochelle Walensky says we are dealing with a pandemic here among the unvaccinated these days. Everyone else taken care of.
More than 120 people have died and hundreds more are still missing after the worst flooding in parts of Western Europe for several decades. In Germany, emergency crews are searching for dozens who are unaccounted for. In Erstadt, in Germany, whole houses have been submerged and a landslide has demolished parts of the town.
The ground just fell away. This is the town of Erstadt, where overnight houses collapsed as the water gushed in. Another shock for a country reeling from the enormity of its loss. It happened so fast, one official said, there was no time for a warning. Rescuers rushed in. But this morning, the authorities here said people trapped in their homes were calling them for help, and in many cases, they just couldn't reach them. Those who did make it out came to shelters like this. We met Johannes here. He and his wife were winched to safety last night. He arrived barefoot and soaking wet. What were you thinking as they winched you up, I asked. I had to leave my cat behind, he says. Johannes has lived here more than 70 years. There have been floods, he told us, but not like this.
You can run from fire, but not from water.
Tens of thousands of people still don't have power. And they're on alert. Water levels have dropped in some areas, but few here feel safe.
You can see how powerful the water is here still. And what's worrying people in this area is that just upstream there's a dam. Experts say it's unstable. They're still inspecting it, but people here think if that dam breaks, the water is heading in this direction.
And with every hour, news of more deaths. People are still missing. With mobile networks down, it's hard to know how many made it to safety. They're desperate for help here. This was a caravan park. How to even begin clearing up? We met the owners, still visibly in shock.
Indescribable. We've been here since 1979. We've never seen anything like this. If we don't get any help, we'll have to go on benefits.
Pleite.
Bankrupt.
Germany A country famed for its strength, its security, feels vulnerable now.
Australia's women's and men's basketball teams have now beaten Team USA in the build-up to the Tokyo Olympics. The Opals beat Team USA for the first time in 11 years in an Olympic warm-up match this morning. Australia was down 41-28 at half-time but fought back to win by 3 points. Izzy McGregor was a standout for the Opals, finishing with 17 points in Las Vegas. The win came on the same day Opal star Liz Cambage withdrew from the Tokyo Games. Cambage said she had been having panic attacks about the prospect of heading into an Olympic bubble. She was being investigated by Basketball Australia over a physical incident in an earlier warm-up match. Records were broken at the British Open overnight. South African Louis Oosthuizen shot the lowest ever score at the halfway point of the tournament to secure a 2-shot lead over American Colin Morikawa. Oosthuizen shot a 5-under score round of 65 in the second round to sit at 11 under par. Morikawa had the equal best round of the day, finishing at 6 under for the round. Jordan Spieth is a shot further back at 8 under. Cameron Smith is the best placed Australian in a tie for 17th, 7 shots off the pace.
Any record at the Open, or part of any record at the Open, is always very special, and you know, I think I've played really good the last 2 days. I probably played a bit better yesterday in the conditions we were playing in, but you know, today we got really, I would say, lucky. Sort of the last 9 holes, it was as good a weather as you can get playing this golf course.
Richmond has defeated Brisbane by 20 points in Jack Riewoldz's 300th game. The Tigers had their first win in 5 matches as the game finished 16-10, 106 to 13-8, 86. Riewoldt kicked 6 goals in his milestone game, while teammate Mabio Chol contributed with 4. Tiger star Dustin Martin had to leave the game in the 3rd quarter after suffering a rib injury. The result also means the reigning premiers move back into the AFL top 8.
A challenging year for us, there's no doubt. You know, troops going in and out of the side, the inconsistency of the way we've been playing, but we felt on the track we've been putting some good work in and getting some good results. So we always knew there was going to be a little bit of a lag effect, but we're really happy with the way we went about it tonight. You know, I thought our intensity was very good. You know, forward half game was up and about, and you know, I thought we defended, especially after half time, pretty well as well, with a young, you know, up and coming defence, which is exciting for us.
Manly has moved up to 5th on the NRL ladder. Des Hasler's side comfortably defeated St George Illawarra on the Gold Coast. The Sea Eagles won 32-18 despite missing key players Tom Trbojevic and Daly Cherry Evans after State of Origin. In the early game, Parramatta cruised to victory against the Gold Coast to move past South Sydney on the NRL ladder. Despite the late withdrawal of playmaker Mitchell Moses, the Eels won 26-8 to temporarily take 3rd spot. Lewis Hamilton has secured pole position for Saturday's new sprint race at the British Grand Prix. The Mercedes driver beat title rival Max Verstappen's Red Bull by 0.075 seconds to secure a top spot for the new 17-lap race introduced this weekend. Mercedes' Valtteri Bottas was 3rd, while Australian Daniel Ricciardo was 7th fastest. The sprint race, which will be just over 100 kilometres in length, will then determine the grid for the second race day later. That is the latest from ABC News. I'm Miriam Korowa. Thank you for your company.
For 20 years, Insiders has brought you the big political stories, the big political players.
Nothing to see here.
Now a government facing pressure over our vaccine rollout.
We're prisoners of our own success.
A new deputy PM and a looming election. Join me, David Spears, as I talk to the movers, shakers and big decision makers and unpack the latest in federal politics.
Insiders, tomorrow at 9 on ABC TV and streaming on iView.
The adventure of a lifetime
has become big business.
Now they offered to climb Mount Everest at half the price.
We can see a lot of unprofessional climbers who just climb to Everest with money.
The deadly disaster unfolding on Mount Everest.
When I first saw that picture, it was like a kick in the gut to me.
Even if I make it to the summit, what if I can't make it back down?
I miss you, Anjali.
This was the perfect storm.
Four Corners, Monday on ABC TV and on iView. Friday, big ideas grow.